Hey everyone, welcome to Rancher's overview training for Rancher version 1.6.10. And my name is Kanara Shah. I'm a software engineer here at Rancher Labs, and I'll be joined by Mohammed, who's going to answer all your questions during the training. So in today's objectives, we are going to go through all the basic Rancher concepts. I'll be giving you a technical introduction to Rancher. We'll definitely keep the slides to a minimum. There are only a couple of slides after this, and then I'll be demoing most of the stuff. As always, questions are obviously welcome. The session is going to be around an hour, but we won't leave until all of the questions are answered. So feel free to ask whatever questions you have. Uh, Before starting, I would like to go through the primary resources that will be very helpful for you to understand Rancher. The first of all, this is our official docs for all the versions. You can go through them whenever you have time. A more interactive version would be the forums, where most of our community users interact with us. There's also our announcements and the releases information here. If you prefer Slack, I usually prefer Slack because most of our engineers are here, and you can interact with the community users and engineers for all the questions and uh, and other stuff that you might have. Today we are going to cover how to set up a Rancher server and add host, setting up access control because you would want to know that no other malicious things can happen to your server, creating environments and understanding the concepts, attaching private registries. It's okay if you don't understand all of these concepts right now. We'll slowly go through them and you'll be able to see them as and when they happen. Adding resources and hosts, creating stack and services, as well as load balancers and service discovery. You can interact with Rancher server through a couple of ways. So we'll go through them. First, we'll go through UI, then Rancher Compose and CLI. I'll also walk you through Rancher catalog. There are a couple of different catalogs that you can use to make full use of Rancher, and I'll give a bit of introduction to how to launch Kubernetes through Rancher. So let's get started. Uh, I'll just go through, I'll show you my Rancher instance running. So before that, you would want to go through the Rancher docs where it mentions all the different kind of setups that you can use for launching a Rancher server. Today we are going to work with Rancher server single container non-HA. So as you see, this command can be used to start the Rancher server. I already have a setup running because it takes a couple of minutes to get it started. But I'll show you how to add hosts. So before that, let's walk through the single setup here. So as you see right now, we are going to be using local MySQL. It is very useful to have this local MySQL when you just want to play around and you have a dev environment working, but it is not recommended. I would recommend using external database because it handles more load and different configurations. And as we move forward, this is my Rancher instance, which is already set up. You can see that I have two hosts with two different labels. Demo is equal to true in both of them. And let's go and add host. So as you see, for adding host, we have a couple of options available. I'll walk you through two different examples. Let's see how to add a custom host first. So Rancher automatically generates the command that you would want to enter for adding a host. And if you have a host that has just Ubuntu running and Docker installed, all you have to do is just copy this command and get the host up running. So let's go ahead and do that. Just a second. I'll bring up my host. So this is how you would, if you have a host running, all you have to do is SSH into it and simply run the command that shows up in the UI. As you saw, what really happened here is it launched a couple of Docker processes that you can see. First of all, it started Rancher agent. This Rancher agent is used to communicate with the Rancher server, and it passes on all the credentials so that your host can really communicate with the server. So if you go to the host screen, you'll be able to see a host coming up, and it will be starting. You can check if it is starting up by if all the services are in the green mode, which is active. I'll talk about the health states later on. So the host that you see in demo host 1 and demo host 2 are DigitalOcean host. It is super easy to add that as well. As you see, we also have DigitalOcean here. All you have to do is give in the API access token. I'll just pause for a bit to put the API access token because I don't really want you guys to see it. I can't pause it.
No. Just go ahead and show it.
Okay. So I'm.
Yep.
So all these options you can see, it's pretty easy. I'm going to put this demo host 5. And the labels that I was talking to you before, demo is equal to true, this is the place where you can just add them. I'll talk about how to use these labels later on, but let's just put them here for a sample case, and it will start up the host. Since this takes a little bit of a while, I already have these 2 hosts running up, and we don't really need this right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. This is how you would have your host up and running. Now I'm going to talk about the different, so as you see, there's an exclamation mark here. Let's do this first. So in the admin tab, until and unless you have some access set up, it's going to show up this exclamation point. You would really want to set up your access. Otherwise, anybody who has your IP address can access your Rancher server. As you see, there are a lot of options available for access. We're just going to set up a local auth. You can read more about them in the documentation. So let's go ahead and set up an admin user, Kinara, and a super secret password, and we'll enable the auth. What happens after enabling is that it will log in you as the user information that you just gave, and it will show that you have been logged in. Next, under the admin tab is the accounts information. So in the accounts, you can just add other users, and we'll see what we can do with them later on. So let's go ahead and add another user, just giving the name user, and we'll generate the password. We already have an admin account, so let's go ahead and keep this user and creating another account. Another thing, we have audit logs. So it is super useful because now, since we have 2 different kinds of users, you will be able to monitor what each user is doing through the API calls under the audit log. And we have processes. So we have just started, so there are no current processes scheduled, but you can see a sample of how they look. So you have name, resource, exit reason. This will be, this information is really helpful when you want to trace and debug anything what is going on the server, as you can see later on. Then we have high availability. We don't really right now have an HA setup, but under here you'll be able to see these sample UUIDs and advertised addresses. So we're done exploring the admin tab. The machine drivers, as I talked about before, these are the ones that you can use to add your own host. So if they follow any of these machine drivers, you can easily just click them and you are all set. Let's now go to the environments and I'll show you how to manipulate with them. When we started, by default, we are in the default environment and it creates a user, and the user that we just created was assigned to this default environment. The environments are very useful when you actually want to isolate resources. So let's say you might want to create separate environments for dev, production, test, and by resources I mean the resources that Rancher creates as well as host. They'll be confined by environment, so you can have a really isolated way of handling things. Each environment has a specific template. So as you can see here, there are a couple of templates that Rancher has already set up for you. But if you want to have your own setup, there are a lot of options that you can configure to set up your own template. So there are different orchestration engines. There are a lot of DNS services, infrastructure services, management, and networking services. I'll later on show you an example of networking using Rancher NFS, and which is one of the storage services that Rancher provides. You can either set it up through here, which is very simple, just enable it, give it your name, the server and base directory, and you're all set. I'll be doing this later when we'll set up a Rancher NFS server using the catalog. Then there's also different frameworks, and all you have to do is create a default template, and a template will be created instead of default, as you are seeing here. And you can easily switch between them by just clicking on these. Now let's move forward to stacks. There are two types of stacks, user as well as infrastructure. For an example, I've created the test, which is a user stack. So you'll be able to see the infrastructure stacks differently. Let's walk through each of them to understand what they do. So the health check is just, as the name suggests, is going to give you the health of each stack and service that you run, and it will assure that the communication between the host and the services is working properly. IPsec handles all the network services. Network services has metadata and DNS, which will allow communication between the containers. And we have scheduler. The scheduler is it hosts different services on different hosts and different stacks depending on the labels that you give. I'll show you an example of the labels in the upcoming parts. So we just saw host and containers. These are all the containers that are running. You can see all the information about them in this tab. It's pretty exhaustive, really. You can see the storage. We just talked about Rancher NFS storage. So once we create that, you'll be able to see that here. There are secrets. To launch secrets, you will have to add the infrastructure service called secrets from the catalog, and then you can enable it. Certificates is really important when you want to do load balancing. So let's say you want to do SSL termination, you will need to add SSL certs here. Also for security purposes, you will want to have HTTPS. So again, you will need to add a cert. Registries, these are very helpful when you want to add your own private registries. So Rancher provides support for that as well. If you want to just pull images from Docker Hub or Quay, all you have to do is just enter your username and password and you'll be done. So we have explored all the menu options here, and now let's go back to stacks and we create a stack. For right now, I'm just going to create a simple service, and I'll walk you through the entire example as we go ahead. So let's create a sample stack called blog. We have a service called ghost, the image, which we'll be providing. As you see here, there's an option called always pull image before creating. So most of the times what happens is that developers, they are making changes to the images pretty frequently, and you would expect those changes to be updated to your host as soon as you want it. So host won't pull up the image if it's already present, which is why you would want to select this option. Then in port map, I'm going to be putting the port where this service runs. Right now I'm putting the same port number, so it might be confusing, but as you know, the public host port is the port that is accessed from the internet, and this public port will be routed to the private port 2368 on the container port. And we see a lot of links here. So command is something that you would want to run in the container of the service when you are starting up the container. Volumes is there are different volume options. As discussed before, there's one is the Rancher NFS. There are different networking modes that you can set for the service. There's security and host options, secrets as we just discussed. There's health check. You can enable health check for a service by giving what particular page do you want to run, and identify if your service is running carefully. There are labels. So just as we added a label to the host, we can also add a label to the service as well. And there's scheduling. So let's say you want to add a rule, and this is where the host label really shines. So if you want to have a particular service run on only a particular host, you can just give the label here, demo is equal to true, and it will run only on the host which satisfy this particular label. Sorry, I enabled health check just to show you, and there we go. So it's coming up. Till then, let me walk you through another example till it sets up. So let's have another stack called demo, and we'll add another service. So what stack is? Stack is, as you saw before, it's just a grouping of services. Now we can add another service. This time I'm going to do Nginx, and here we'll have the Nginx image. Previously, we were running only one container. Now, let's run a couple of containers so you can see how scaling works. It's going to run 6 containers of Nginx. And we'll do the scheduling as before. So our blog is ready. We can see the Ghost app running at 2368. See how simple was that? And going back to our demo stack, even the Nginx is up. So this demo is going to be more powerful because we are running 6 containers of Nginx. So let's create a load balancer that routes the traffic to each of these containers. So creating LB, we'll give it a port which is the source port where the traffic is going to be, and LB is going to route that to our Nginx containers at port 80 where Nginx runs. So as we create an LB, to identify that the LB is working properly, I'm going to add one more service called as test, and I'm going to use an image of my coworker, which basically will give you the container ID of the container that is currently running. So let's pull this image and see how it runs. This is taking a while. I'm just going to delete this and retry again. Let's do it now. Previously we pointed it to Nginx. Let's point out to this service so that you can actually see which container ID it is currently running. We'll wait for this load balancer to come up. It's taking a while. Let's see. So it's in the initializing mode. We talked about the health checks before. So if your service is perfectly active, it will show up as active. And if it was still initializing, it will be in the initializing mode. It's already set up. So let's go to this. In order to see what container it is running, we'll use the name.html, which will give you the container name. So as you see, this is the container ID that is running right now. When we refresh, we'll be able to see the another container ID. And this really verifies that our load balancer is working correctly. Now, let's walk through how you can access Rancher server in a couple of ways. We have always been adding these through the UI as we saw a couple of examples. Let's try doing that using the CLI. So downloading CLI, there's an option here that you can see and you can select according to your operating systems. I already have it running. So I'm just going to give you a simple example, but running it is very easy. All you have to do is download. It will be a zip file and install it. In order to see how we interact with Rancher CLI, let's I'll first give you a simple example and see all the things that you can do with that. So you can do your multiple operations with catalog setting up client configurations, running Docker as well, manipulating stacks, services, all the things that you do in the UI. Most of them they are supported using the Rancher Compose. But how does Rancher Compose talk to your UI? So you need to give it the URL and the API access keys. I'll show you how to do that. So this is our server URL that you see I'm copying, and you can set that up using the URL. And you will need the access key so that the particular instance of CLI can register to the server. So in order to do that, you have to click the API, and we'll do it confining to a particular environment so that it doesn't get added to other environments. And let's go ahead and generate this. As the warning message says, you need to store them somewhere. So let's just go ahead and give it the access key and secret key. PS, as you know, will just list the processes that are running here. So I'm sorry. So as you see, after the URL, I missed out a space, and it considers this as a particular URL. You need to make sure that each of the parameters are individually assigned. And you'll be able to see all the services that we have in this particular environment. You would normally not want to give the access and secret key for each command that you run, and it's easy to just set them up once, and we'll see how you can do that. So in the docs in Rancher CLI, you can see that you can export these parameters very easily, and all the commands that you can use with Rancher CLI are in the docs. You can play with them to see more. Let's move on to catalogs. So what actually are catalogs? We have a lot of options here. So the library catalogs are the catalogs which Rancher has certified, the ones that we really want to use. These are the basic fundamentals for deploying your services. They mostly contain the infrastructure stacks up and running, so you don't really have to do anything. There's community catalogs. We have a rich community support which is pretty active, and they have uploaded a lot of catalogs of their own which they want you to try, and it's really just one-click sort of thing. You only need to give different configurations, and it will run. It's pretty smooth. But aside from this, we also have private catalogs. So private catalogs can be both at the environment level or they can be global. You can add an environment catalog through here and manage catalogs. If you want to add a catalog, just go here and you have to give the GitHub link, and you can add it to your environment. For global catalogs, you need to be an admin. You need to be of an admin user role to do that. So if you are an admin URL, you can go to the settings and you can see the option here, which is for adding catalogs. You can add a catalog here, which will be at a global level. I'll also want you to show how these community catalogs look. So all you have to do is go to our community catalogs, and you can see the different types of catalogs that we have, and different YAML files, compose files. You can also play with them and add your own catalog. The one option that we still didn't discuss was persistent storage. So persistent storage, as we right now we don't have anything. Let's now play with the catalog and we'll add a Rancher NFS catalog to see how it works. So Rancher networking services has been, we already have that deployed. And here we go for Rancher NFS. So for enabling that, I'm going to add my Rancher NFS server details and the base directory, and you can bring this up. As you can see, this comes up under the infrastructure stack, and we can now create a user stack to experiment with persistent storage, which we'll do just in a minute as the NFS stack comes up. There we go. So let's create an NFS stack. So as you see, with practice, it just becomes really easy to go ahead and add services with the same part. Let's create an Nginx service, which we have done a couple of times now. Let's give this foo. And if you want to access Rancher using the compose files but not using the terminal, you can do that. You can also give the compose files in the stack itself. So here, if we have a new NFS stack and you want to just give the Docker compose files and Rancher compose, you can do them here as well. So let's go find persistent storage. We can find that under infrastructure services, and in persistent storage service, we'll use the image files from here. So for each of these infrastructure services, we have available Docker Compose files in the documentation, which you can just easily use, just as I did before. So we'll give it a terminal true, so that we can exec into the container and see what's happening. So let's go ahead and create this service. Oh, I think I did some space issue, so I'm going to do that again. I'm not sure why is it not taking the spacing issues, but let me do that in here so it gets the correct format. And now we should be set. There we go. So we have the service set up, and to make the full use of volumes, because we have a persistent storage now, let's go ahead and do that again. And now you can see here we have a volume. So in order to add volumes, if you are doing it from the UI, what this Rancher Compose does is it creates a container volume called bar, and it points to the where lib storage here, which mounts there. So if you want to add a volume through UI, you can easily do that. And I'm not really sure what's the issue here, but if you have this, if you have the same, if you have your Rancher NFS server set up properly, you'll be able to just see, you'll be able to go to this mount point and see that you'll be able to see that the Rancher NFS is running properly. When we discussed environments, we have a couple of default environments that are present, that Rancher has already set up for you. By default, we were running cattle. If you want to set up Kubernetes, it's again very simple. All you have to do is go to an environment and click on Kubernetes, give it some name, and it will be all set. I really like creating the Kubernetes environment this way, because you don't have to set up the control manager and everything by yourself, but it's all done for you, and you can just go there and see it's running properly. You will need to add host, as we did that for our Rancher cattle environment, but but I've already done that for you to see how it works. So here it's already set up, and we can see all the infrastructure stacks. So under Kubernetes, you will see that everything that is required for running Kubernetes is already set up for you. We also have, I'm not going to go into much detail in here, because we also have a separate Kubernetes training which will walk you through the concepts as well as creating instances there. But just to see the terminal here, we have a shell here which is ready for you. So all you have to do is do kubectl get all, and it will run in the browser itself. That's all that I have for today. Do we have any questions or anything that you would like to address?
I'm just looking through the questions. I think that they've all been addressed by Mohammed, so I think we're in good shape there. Did you have a couple of wrap-up slides that you wanted to cover?
So yeah, as I talked about the Rancher Kubernetes training, you can go ahead and check that at rancher.com Kubernetes training. If you want to try out Rancher not by setting up, but just immediately in the browser, you can also do that by just going to this link, and you have to authenticate using your GitHub, and you can set it up. That's it from my side. Thank you so much.